Joining us now to unpack all of this is Cliff Albright, co-founder and executive director of Black Voters Matter. Cliff, good morning. Great to have you back here. What can you tell us about the legal challenges to this law? I've seen the ACLU and a couple other organizations are filing lawsuits here. Is there any chance that any of these lawsuits are likely to succeed here?
Well, we certainly hope so, and good morning to you. We certainly hope so, considering we are the plaintiffs in one of those lawsuits. There's actually been three. I think we were the first to file ours, and when I say we, that's Black Voters Matter, along with our friends and co-plaintiffs at New Georgia Project and RISE. But there have been two others since then, including the one by the ACLU that you mentioned. And yes, we believe that there's a good chance. We believe that we're going to show that this law is a violation of the 14th Amendment, that it's going to violate voting rights disproportionately against Black and brown voters. How do we know this? We know because many of these provisions that have been enacted in the past, or some form such as photo ID, have been shown to have a disparate impact on the Black community, and there are other provisions as well. And so we believe that at the end of the day, if we get a fair hearing in court, that we'll be victorious.
Yeah, you mentioned the voter ID laws in this. Brian Kemp coming out essentially saying we in the media are overplaying this, overhyping this. He said it actually expands early voting access for many people. Is that true? What do you say to that?
Right. Now, this law attacks early voting and vote by mail at various phases of the process. It particularly attacks vote by mail. It attacks the deadlines, the days that are available for absentee voting. It attacks the locations that you can use, the drop boxes that you can use. As I previously mentioned, it attacks the photo ID requirements. Adding a photo ID requirement, which is not necessary at all, because, again, we have to keep in mind that all of this is based on a big lie. The entire rationale, the entire premise for this bill, that there's somehow some rampant fraud that was taking place, is the same big lie that led to the overtaking of the Capitol, the riot at the Capitol. And so when you start from that premise, when you start from the premise that, as the Speaker of the House said, the Republican Speaker of the House said, that we need to cut back all this voter access because if we don't, then Republicans will never be able to win elections. When you understand that background, then you understand exactly what the purpose of this bill is, what of this law is. It has nothing to do with security. It has everything to do with voter suppression and Jim Crow 2.0.
Cliff, obviously a lot of pressure has now been coming on a lot of the corporate businesses in Georgia, some of the biggest employers out there, Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines in particular. Both of the CEOs of those companies coming out issuing statements, finally essentially saying how terrible the law is here. Is the pressure working on these companies to get them to issue these statements? And is there any hope that these businesses can help in this process?
Yeah, I guess they say the third time's the charm, because many of these companies had to issue about 3 different statements before they finally got close to getting it right. And so, yes, Coca-Cola and Delta came out with much stronger statements than they had in the past. Delta's second statement, the statement that they released after the bill was passed, was actually insulting and really amounted to gaslighting. But we're glad to see that they've come out with stronger words. Now we need to see them come out with stronger actions. And yes, there's a chance that if they do so, that we can defeat this bill. Because I'd say defeat this bill, we can overturn or repeal this now law. That's part of what our demands are, is that we want, and when I say our coalition here, we want this law to be overturned. We want it to be repealed, if possible, sooner, but, at the very least in the next session that the legislature has. The other thing that we're asking them to do is that they put their full throttle support behind H.R. 1 and H.R. 4. These are Georgia companies that we had targeted, but they're also national and global companies. They need to speak to this national issue because, as you noted earlier, this is something that we're seeing in over 40 states across the country. And so we're also asking them to speak out against the current state versions of these bills in states like Arizona and Michigan and Texas, where I was this past week, because, again, we're seeing this in all these states, and it's going to take a united effort to defeat this voter suppression.
And Cliff, there has been increased talk of boycotting a lot of companies out there, especially in Georgia. We've heard that a lot from Hollywood actors right now. Stacey Abrams has come out saying, listen, I don't necessarily support a boycott right now, given the fact that Georgia just turned blue, gave the Senate 2 Democratic senators as well. Do you support a boycott, or are you with Stacey Abrams here saying not just yet?
Right. Our coalition has technically not called for a boycott. We've been talking about corporate accountability and putting corporate pressure on these corporations, including direct actions as we did at Coca-Cola and Delta. With that said, I'm not against a boycott. We're not going to either call for organizations to boycott or tell folks to not boycott. So when the Major League Players Association said that they're considering asking to move the All-Star game from Georgia, we encourage that, right? Because at the end of the day, we know that in the past, a couple of years ago, it was that kind of pressure that led to these states, including Georgia and North Carolina, to defeat bathroom bills. And so we know that that tactic can work. I agree with, I call her Madam Governor. I agree with Stacey Abrams that, we have to be cognizant of the pressures that are put on the voters and the citizens of Georgia. When you call for a boycott, we don't want our people to suffer economically. But at the end of the day, what's happening is we're already suffering. We suffer. Voter suppression is a bread and butter issue. We suffer from the economic impacts of racism and Jim Crow every day. And so we're always put in this choice of, are we going to have to sacrifice because of a boycott, or are we going to have to sacrifice because of the daily structural racism that we face? And so, we make the argument that, we need to stand up. And if organizations want to boycott, we encourage that and support that. But we're not going to force that on the everyday consumers of the state of Georgia. We need major organizations that travel to the state. Like you said, industries, like the entertainment or sports industries, we need them to help carry the weight of a boycott. And again, being aware of the impact that we're having on the very folks that are being impacted by the voter suppression.
All right, Cliff Albright, co-founder and executive director of Black Voters Matter. Cliff, always a pleasure to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.